Back to My Garden, episode 40.
Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
Tomatoes. Do you love homegrown tomatoes? Free Report reveals the 5 dirt cheap tools I use to grow 22 types of heirloom tomatoes, including my secret soil booster. Download your copy for free today at www.backtomygarden.com/free report. This awesome episode of Back to My Garden sponsored by Coffee Royalty. Can you really lose 5, 10, even 20 pounds or more just by switching your coffee or tea? Find out how to drink it for free at www.backtomygarden.com/coffee. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. I'm Dave Ledoux, and welcome to another edition of Back to My Garden. And today I've got a teacher. We're going to learn a ton of things about gardening. Charles is an author, a vegetable grower, and he specializes in salads. He loves growing without digging. We're going to explore that concept. He's a brilliant garden teacher, a lecturer, and a passionate tour guide at Home Acres. He hails from Somerset in the United Kingdom, and he has a book out called Salad Leaves for All Seasons. We're going to talk about that as well. I want to welcome to the show Charles Dowding. Hi, Charles.
Hello, Dave.
Greetings from Canada to England.
I'm sorry?
Greetings from Canada to England.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, that's great. And from England to Canada.
I gave you a brief introduction, Charles, and I know I want to hear your story, and our listeners want to get to know a little bit about you. Take a minute or two and just share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into gardening.
Well, I grew up on a farm, and it was a dairy farm nearby here, and my parents were not actually that keen on gardening, although my mother liked to grow vegetables for the house. And it wasn't until I went to university, I went to Cambridge actually and read geography and got a good degree. And I was my parents, I think, hoped that I'd get a well-paid job. And I actually got more interested in gardening. So I came back to the farm and persuaded them to let me have 1.5 acres of ground and borrowed my father's rotavator to break up the grass and turn it into a tilth. And then I made beds. I made raised beds. I got interested in organic food, really. That's what got me into it. Healthy food for healthy living. And at that time, this was the early 80s, 1982, there was not much organic growing going on, and it was a pretty revolutionary thing to do. So some people were looking at me a bit askance, but I just did it anyway and kept my head down and discovered that organic vegetable growing was such a satisfying thing to do, and it worked really well and gave you really healthy food of great flavour. And then I got more and more into actually how you do it best, and the thing that concerned me most was weeds, because I had seen so many market gardens, organic market gardens in the previous year, which were just buried in weeds. And I thought, oh no, there must be a better way to do it. So I discovered No Dig through reading actually Ruth Stout, who I think was from Connecticut, and she did it with a hay mulch. Mm-hmm. So putting that on top, and worms can't take it in. They do the digging basically. So encouraging soil life, no need to dig. And I thought, right, I'll try that. And I bought some old hay quite cheaply, spread it on my ground in the first spring, and discovered that in our part of the world, in England, it's much damper than Connecticut, and oh boy, did I get a lot of slugs. So I abandoned the hay idea. It taught me a lesson, though. That was very useful, because it taught me that actually it's dangerous, tricky to transpose ideas from one part of the world to another, different climate zones, all that kind of thing. And, you've got to adapt to wherever you are. So today, I'll be hopefully talking more about principles than precise recipes. But anyway, I've developed a really nice way of growing No Dig using compost, basically, because compost doesn't encourage slugs, and it feeds the soil, and you can sow and plant into it. And I spread a thin layer every autumn, winter, or spring, and depending when the ground's clear, after harvest, and that sets me up for a productive year. And there you have it.
Wow. You gave us a lot to work with there, Charles. Now, we have listeners They're probably stuck in rush hour traffic driving in their car listening to us right now. So for you driving, keep both hands on the wheel. I'll have all of the show notes and links to Charles's blog on BackToMyGarden.com, and it'll be /40. Charles has a very active Twitter feed at Charles Dowding, Dowding, and he has a great blog filled with good resources at charlesdowding.co.uk. Okay, Charles, so your first garden as an adult was about the size of a soccer pitch, a football pitch, and then you had zone adaptation problems with slugs who liked your hay mulch. Okay, good. I want you to, please, you're in a train of thought on talking about composting and no-dig. Mm-hmm. That is very attractive, very sexy for a lot of our listeners. Explain how it works, what you like best about it, and any surprises.
Well, it's actually very simple, and this is what intrigues me, that it's often made to sound more complicated than it is, and I don't know why, but all you're doing really is replicating what happens in nature, but with a few shortcuts. Because if you look what happens in nature and how at this time of year where we are now, in August, already things are going towards autumn and leaves are dropping, plants are dying, old leaves are resting on the ground, and they don't just stay there. Things come and find them, all kinds of life in and on the soil. Worms most obviously, but lots of other things too, like beetles and millipedes and all those things. And they're all devouring this bounty from summer growth and convert it one way or another into different products, and it goes into the soil. And in so doing, they're all traveling in and through the soil and keeping the soil alive and open. And so no-dig gardening for growing vegetables is a replication of this, but the difference with growing vegetables to growing what grows in nature, bushes and trees and grass, is that vegetables are very demanding plants. And they're like the Olympic athletes of the plant world, and they need respecting for that. So you've got to really look after your vegetables when you want to grow good ones. And compost, it turns out, is the golden route to doing this, because in a compost heap, you're taking a shortcut of all the processing that happens in nature in a much longer and more spread out way, and you're making a beautiful concoction of lovely dark humus, which you can spread on the soil, and then soil organisms love that. They come looking for it, and worms in particular, earthworms, they'll shoot upwards for the compost and then shoot down again as they eat it. And that's, if you like, digging and aerating the soil. So that is the link between compost and no-dig. Soil aeration is good. There's no doubt about that. I think it's actually much more effective done in this way, encouraging soil life to do it rather than physically doing it ourselves with fork or spade or rototiller, whatever it might be, for many reasons. And two key ones is the structure that is created by soil life, the channels like earthworm burrows and those kinds of things, is much more stable and permanent than the structure which is left after man's cultivations, which is very fragile. And that's, I'm sure some of you would have noticed how you pass the rototiller and then you can't really walk on the soil without leaving a huge footprint. And that's not good, because you're kind of undoing the loosening you've just done. So in no-dig, you can actually walk on soil, undug soil with compost on top, and it has a nice springy feel, a bit like walking through the forest, in fact. And so that opens up possibilities, because you can get on the ground more in all weathers, and you've got lovely open soil all the time in a very stable way. And the other big advantage is weeds, because undisturbed, untilled soil grows less weeds. There's just no doubt about it. I actually run experiments in my garden where I actually dig a bed just to see, and alongside it I have a no-dig bed. The dug bed I actually dig in the compost, and the undug one I leave it on top. Grow the same vegetables in both, and actually growth is very similar in the end. I keep record of all the yields, there's hardly any difference. But the interesting thing is that there's some of the ancillary things like more weeds on the dug soil. So yeah, there's lots to learn from trying these things, and it's all good really for no-dig. It's easier, it saves time, and you have less weeding.
I want to jump in. You just said there's less weeds on when you just leave the compost on the top of the bed than when you work it deep into the soil.
Yeah.
That's heresy. That's scandal.
Oh, come on.
That's what about all the backbreaking work that people think, I got to get in and get working the soil, and wow.
Yeah. Well, that's such an interesting question, and it's one I keep asking myself, because I think, why wouldn't more people use this method? Because I feel I've proved it very well, and lots of people come to my garden. I run lots of courses here, and people go away enthused and fascinated, and I get nice reports back when they try the no-dig way on their allotment or garden, whatever. I don't know if there isn't a sort of a difficulty with just changing practice. People are reluctant to. It's very deeply ingrained, to dig and cultivate, and just in the language. In Britain we had in the World War dig for victory, which is brilliant. But it's interesting that was how it was coined, and the sort of impulse to reach for the spade or something.
I'd like you to speak to all of our rookie gardeners out there who maybe they're a little afraid of starting composting. Do you have any tips or suggestions on good ways to start your first compost?
Yeah, well, composting is not difficult. Things want to break down, basically. So the questions revolve around more how you assemble a heap and the time scale that you can expect it to happen in. And basically, I would allow the best part of a year for, realistically, you can make compost much more quickly. But you need to be turning it frequently to admit fresh air and all those things. So in the very simplest terms, you just need preferably a container to keep things all together. And also having sides which don't admit light is actually quite an advantage. You can use pallets, and that's fine, but light excluding sides will stop any weed regrowth of things you might put on. And
okay.
Another tip I give is that put anything on. There's a lot of composting is made to sound much more difficult than it is, because you get all these supposed rules about what you can and can't put in. You're not meant to put bindweed roots, for example, quackgrass roots. You're not meant to put blighted potato and tomato leaves from late blight. I put all of that in. I put everything, and it all just compost. It disappears. Rhubarb leaves, lemon peel, so just literally everything. Obviously not plastic and metal and things, but any garden waste can go in the compost. There's no need to spend time separating and sorting it. And then you just need to be patient, and it will slowly rot down. It helps if you can keep heavy rainstorms off, because air is key ingredient. You don't want it flooded out. As long as there's some air in there all the time, you can get apparatus with little spiky things that you can use to aerate your heap, and that would help. It's not vital. But, if you're patient and just keep chucking stuff in, you will get nice compost.
Nice. Black gold.
Yeah, black gold, absolutely. It is worth its weight in gold for gardening, because you actually don't need much. When you make really good quality compost in the way I've described, the thing with growing vegetables is you do need quite a bit to grow good ones, though. And, it might be worth looking at where you can find, I don't know, say you have municipal composting in your part of the world. That's worth checking out. And also farmers who might have a bit of spare manure, that's another valuable resource.
Nice. Charles, I want to throw a tricky one at you. You're so knowledgeable and so experienced. It might be a little intimidating, because a lot of the rookie gardeners think you've never made a mistake in the garden and everything you touches turns green. Can you share a confessional moment where you did something catastrophically horrific in the garden and share it in a humorous way?
Well, it happens all the time, actually, Dave. Yeah, I mean, it's how one learns. It's a good point, though, because, I can see that it could be intimidating if you think that someone sort of knows all the answers and gets it right. I certainly don't. Well, to give you some examples, I mean, just this spring I planted out a whole bed of lettuce, 200 lettuce, like I've been doing for over 30 years, and I lost every single plant. And it turned out that we had a very mild winter here last year, unusually warm, and it was ideal for pests which are normally controlled a bit by weather in winter. And it was something called leather jackets, which are the larvae of crane fly spiders, and they'd all survived. And they were just, the soil was just heaving with them, and every lettuce plant I put in, every spinach, it died. And I actually had no remedy for that except to fork through the soil with a trowel and hoik them out as much as it was possible to find them. And that was painful, because I grow salad for sale, actually, and I had to disappoint some customers. Then one year I sowed carrots, and I sowed too many and hadn't prepared the ground properly. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, I'd rotivated it. This is a bit of a confession here. It was when I was trying to grow more vegetables organically. There was a shortage of carrots on the market, and I rotivated a half acre and got a mate to drill the carrots by machine. And, this is where it's quite a lesson, actually, because using machines, it's very easy to prepare large areas of soil, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can keep up with the results. And in my case, these carrots came up nicely, but so did the chickweed. And, oh boy, chickweed after a rotivator, that's another story. And we had a mild spring, a damp spring, and I couldn't get on it with a hoe, so this chickweed just kept growing, and I actually ended up losing those carrots. Whole half acre of carrots gone, smothered in chickweed. So there you go.
We have a lot of listeners, Charles, who have, 3 or 4 pots on a balcony on a tall skyscraper in a big city. And to think of a half acre of carrots, that's like a city park. And to have wow.
Okay.
The attitude, though, you're smiling about it. We can hear it in your voice. Attitude is everything.
Yeah, well, with the benefit of hindsight, it's not funny at the time, but there's no doubt that you always learn from mistakes.
Brilliant. I want to hear about your book, because growing salad for sale, that's unique. You're one of our first guests that does anything like that. How did you find out about that line of work? I know you've done it for a while. Talk a bit about the concepts in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd always grown heads of lettuce for sale back in the 80s, but it was talking to a local shopkeeper about 12 years ago who said, there's a lot of people now like to buy salad in mixed leaves in a bag. And he got me going, basically, and I thought, well, that's nice, because as a gardener, one of the nice things about gardening, growing, it's very similar, growing for sale, you want to be interested in your work and growing lots of different interesting plants and not just the same rows of one plant. So growing bags of mixed salad for sale, I can put in all sorts of lovely, unusual flavors and colors and leaves of all shapes and sizes that I'd actually struggle to sell individually. And I've developed a way of growing salad also with different ways of picking. For lettuce, for example, this is something I cover in my book a lot. If you really look after your lettuce plants in nice, healthy soil with a bit of compost on top, they will respond by growing for you for a very long time. And what you do is, instead of sowing thick rows and doing a quick cut and coming back once or twice more and then they're gone, because they sort of overcrowded really often, you plant them out at a wider spacing, 9 inches, and just take off the outer leaves on a regular basis, say every 5 days. And those plants keep on growing for 9-10 weeks of harvest. So you haven't got to keep sowing, but you get regular supplies, and it's not the feast or famine, but it's lots and lots of goodies. So, lots of interesting things like that have come out of my recent salad growing of bags for mixed leaves, and it works on any scale. For people on balconies with only pots, you could just have a big pot of leaves, salad, lettuce in this case, particularly, because lettuce is the most productive one, but there's many other things you can grow. Plant your lettuce in a big pot and wait until they're big enough. Plant them about 5-6 inches apart in a pot. When they're just big enough that the leaves are touching, gently twist off the lower outer leaves, always leaving, never use a knife, and you're always leaving that central crown of small leaves, which will very quickly regrow and give you another harvest in a week's time. And that's the difference to using a knife, because when you cut across the top, it takes longer for a plant to regenerate. So at first it might seem a bit more fiddly until you get the hang of it, and then you'll find that once your plants get to a sort of late teenage stage of life, and where they stay for a long time, and you know how much energy teenagers have got. So these plants keep reducing for a long time. It's great.
Brilliant. Oh, people got their money's worth right there, because biggest complaint I heard this year, everyone's lettuce was bolting in June.
Right. Yeah, well, taking off the outer leaves is interesting on any plant, actually. How you pick and harvest and look after your plants influences as much as, timings of sowings and how you grow them and everything. And picking is a key thing. Regular harvest of outer leaves, but never too much, but regular, it keeps plants in a kind of younger phase of life. And, I like to think of my salad plants as being continually youthful until there does come a time where they must think, hang on a minute, we can't go on forever doing like this, and they do send up a flowering stem, and then the game's up, and you need to resow and replant. But you can keep them productive for a long time. It's very nice.
Charles, talk to us a little bit about your personal garden this year. What grew and made you very happy, and was there anything that frustrated you?
Well, yeah, pests have been the number one problem, actually, in Britain this year because of this mild winter, and we've had things like cabbage weevils eating brassicas that aren't normally a major problem. There was a huge residue of slugs after winter, so my first 3 sowings of carrots, although they came up fine, they also disappeared very quickly. And you can tell it's slugs because it looks like they never came up, but if you look really closely, you can just see these tiny little green stems which have been devoured of their leaves. And I'm struggling to think now. There have been quite a few other pests, sort of unexpected things happening, plants disappearing or just getting gobbled. But having said that, as I look out the window now, I'm looking at abundance, and that is a bit of the story with pests, that they can seem daunting at that particular time. You've just got to keep going. Like with my carrots, for example, I did a 4th sowing later than usual, late April, and that's yielding lots of carrots at the moment. And occasionally you get years like this when it happens, and you just keep going. But the plus side has been that we've had mostly favourable weather this year. We had a warm spring and a warm early summer, and occasional rain, but not too much. So really, it's actually been a bumper year in the end, but after a tricky start.
Very good. Let's take a quick minute to thank our sponsors and then come back and play 5 quick questions. Attention gardeners, do you love perennial flowers? Get a free online catalog and 10% off your first order of bulbs at Bloom & Bulbs. I just set up a special link for you. Go to www.backtomygarden.com/bulb for your unique bonus. Are you concerned about toxic chemicals, GMOs, and frankenfood? Don't panic. Grow organic. Discover my new resource for organic gardeners. Go to www.backtomygarden.com/myorganic. I'm looking at the clock, and our time is rapidly going fast.
Oh, no.
No, this is the time in the show when we play a game called 5 Quick Questions.
All right.
This is your chance to share wisdom with novice gardeners. Are you ready to play?
Okay.
Question number 1, Charles. In your opinion, what do you think stops most new people from trying their first garden?
I wonder if it might be a fear of making a mistake or a feeling that, I couldn't possibly do this. And I would say, no, you can. Or yes, you can, I should say, really. Because gardening it draws you in. And I would urge anyone with that feeling just to do something small to start with, because just sowing that first seed, even if it's in a pot, a box container. In winter, I grow a lot of salad in old mushroom boxes I get from the store, line them with newspaper, fill them with compost, and sow a few seeds, plant a few plants in each one. And they just grow lovely. That kind of scale, starting out, can get you enthused, I reckon. And once you get enthused, there'll be no holding you back.
Brilliant. Question number 2. You've had a lot of great teachers. What's the single best piece of gardening advice that you've ever received?
It's from a guy I used to go and garden with in Wales, and he was running a market garden, and it relates to the previous question, actually. He said, go for it, he said, you can do it. He said, you could be a grower, because that's what we were talking about, commercial scale growing at that time. But he gave me the belief. So his advice was to be encouraged and believe in yourself. And in fact, that does relate to how I garden and how I'd like to encourage other people to garden too, which is, don't always believe everything you hear or see written or are told. Trust your own intuition, because gardening is a very personal thing. And I've noticed, it's one of the joys of looking at other people's gardens. They're all different, so different. And one always learns something from looking at other people's gardens, just as they learn something from looking at mine. So, allow your own way of doing it to come out. And although there are better ways and worse ways, there's no actual absolute right and wrong. Have a few experimentings and find the way that is most comfortable for you.
Wonderful. Question 3. Can you recommend one or two websites for the novice gardener that you like?
Well, apart from my own, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone should go to charlesdowding.com right away.
Yeah. Golly, yeah. I didn't do my homework on this one, Dave, and I'm struggling to think of it actually. Because I'll tell you what, I am so busy maintaining my own website and looking after my garden. I don't really do a lot of traveling around the internet.
Hey, that's fine. You can pass on number 3. We'll go on to number 4. Where can someone get your book, and can you recommend a gardening book that you like?
Yeah, the person who also encouraged me into gardening was someone called Joy Larkham, and she's written lovely books about gardening. She lives in Ireland now. She's British, and she's written books on salad and basic vegetable growing. I'm afraid I can't remember the titles off my head, but if you Google Joy Larkham, that's Larckom, it will come up with a list of books, and they're all on Amazon, for example. My books are on Amazon. In fact, I've written 6 books now, and one I'd like to mention is Myth, which is about just, different, looking at things in a slightly different way, gardening myths, and finding simpler ways to do things like that. For example, you can water plants in the middle of the day in bright sunlight, the leaves won't scorch, and crazy things like that. And another person I've really liked is, there's so many actually, it's quite hard to pull any out of the hat. But yeah, Ruth Stout was a good influence, and I really like the way she writes. She makes it all sound possible. And then Masanobu Fukuoka, who wrote One Straw Revolution from Japan, although his ideas don't work in Britain, but just the underlying principles and the way he talks about nature and working with nature, I found that brilliant. And finally, I'd love to mention Eve Balfour as well, who founded the Soil Association in Britain. And she came from an incredibly aristocratic family, like her grandfather was Prime Minister of Great Britain. But she spent all her life working on a farm in Suffolk and founded the Soil Association, pioneered organic farming here. And she writes in such a down-to-earth, sensible, approachable way that I just love her books.
Do you know how to spell Eve's last name?
Sorry?
Do you know how to spell Eve's last name? Is it B-A-L-F-O-R-T?
Balfour, Balfour is B-A-L-F-O-U-R.
You are, okay. I'm going to put a link to Eve and Joy and to Ruth, and then, of course, to your books.
Thank you.
I want to get Myth, because my wife says, you can't water in the middle of the day. Actually, she'll delete that part off the show because she'll give me a look, okay? We'll have to have links to all 6 books. Congratulations. That's very prolific.
Yes, thanks. I'm just writing a 7th, actually. There's an incredible demand, and it's lovely, wonderful interest in growing your own. And I've just hit that seam at the right time. And, it's been quite a journey writing these books.
Question number 5. It's a fun one. What do you think is the number one thing that every gardener should try to grow next season?
Well, I'm going to say salad, because I really do think that. You'd like a funny answer as well, would you?
Oh, hey, anything goes on this one because everyone's so different.
Oh, right, okay. Well, just being very serious for a moment, if you've only got a small space And even if you've never sown anything before, I would grow salad because it's fast to grow. You can grow a surprising amount in a small area and keep picking and picking, and you'll get so much to eat from it that you'll be encouraged to try perhaps some more crazy things. And I'll throw out an interesting one, which is a vegetable called OCA, which is spelled OCA. I'm only trying it myself for the second year here, but I was so impressed last year, I'm growing more this year. Another word for it is New Zealand yam, and it's an extraordinary plant which looks like a big bush of clover, about a foot high, sometimes with yellow flowers in the summer, and you're basically growing tubers. But you have to wait until it's got slightly frosty. It could be interesting in Canada because I gather your frosts come on pretty fast in the fall, but it's got to have got cold enough that the message has gone from leaf and stem to fill out the tubers below. So you actually don't harvest it in the plant until the plant has died on top. But then you want to get it out pretty fast before the tubers get clobbered by hard frost. And what you get is lovely red tubers that you can eat like fruits, but you've got to first of all leave them in bright sun on a sunny windowsill for 3 or 4 weeks to get the flavour going there. Wow. So anyway, if you Google that, it'll come up, OCA, with all those details. But it's important to know those details, because if you tried to harvest it at the wrong time, it wouldn't be so nice.
When you bring that over to your in-laws, they're going to say, "What the heck is that? It's OCA."
Yeah. Well, when people first see it, they're like shiny red tubers after you've washed them, and they just look like nothing else, really. You can get yellow ones, too, but it's just the sort of thing that's fun, and kids like them, too, so, good.
Brilliant. Our time has flown by, Charles, and you've been a brilliant guest. I want to give you the last word to all the listeners today. In fact, I was wondering, do you have a pearl of wisdom or a note of encouragement to leave us with on our gardening adventures?
Well, so many. Which one to pick? I would echo what I said before, actually, that to get out there, that's probably the one to say. Sometimes I think we can spend too much time wondering what to do in the garden, and you want to get out there and get your hands in the soil and compost and get that feeling, be out there with nature around you and go for it. Quite often I find in the morning when I go out in the garden, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be doing, but boy, do I find those jobs. And so, that links into the whole thing of tuning into your sort of gut feeling about what you want to be doing in the garden, how you want to do it, how you want to grow. It's all a big bit of growing up, really.
Fantastic. Charles, thank you so much for being on Back to My Garden.
Oh, well, it's been a pleasure, Dave, and thank you for being such a nice host.